I don't mind living with discomfort. As long as I'm not more unhappy than I am now, that's enough for me. I don't ask for much. All I want is to build a peaceful and happy home with my husband, Kevin. But he has a habit of troubling me in his own peculiar way. Whenever we have a small argument, he locks himself in the upstairs restroom. For instance, the other day, I simply asked him, "Can we have more conversations as a family?" Just those words seemed to burden him somehow. I could hear the faint sound of the restroom door closing and the lock clicking into place. I let out a deep sigh. "Here we go again. What is wrong with you?" I muttered under my breath. To me, the time between coming home from work and going to bed is precious time meant for family togetherness. But Kevin, if even slightly displeased, would retreat to the restroom without a word. Rather than confronting the issue, he chose to escape. I couldn't stand it anymore. Recently, I caught sight of him walking down the street with a woman I didn't know. When I asked him who was that woman, he unnaturally fell silent. "Why won't you answer me? Is it really that hard to explain?" "Well, I mean," he hesitated, then reached into his bag to pull out his planner and said, "I have an important business trip next week. Let me think about it until then." With barely an explanation, he left for the trip the very next day. That night, after he was gone, I was overwhelmed by a wave of sadness. He had always been kind since the day we met, quiet and with few friends, but warm and reliable. Even so, whenever we fought, his refuge was always the upstairs restroom. What was he thinking about in that cramped space? Was he secretly contacting someone he was seeing behind my back? The thought brought a stream of tears I couldn't stop. "Why has it come to this?" I muttered, feeling as though I was to blame. Then it happened. "Mom, come here, quick. Look at this." I heard my daughter Monica shouting from upstairs. Her voice, tinged with excitement, startled me, and I rushed up to find her standing frozen in front of the restroom door. In her innocent eyes, I saw something lurking, something unknown yet unsettling. Her youthful innocence and the truth she might be holding unraveled me further. My name is Melissa. Like anyone else, there are moments when I drift into memories of the past. For me, one life-altering event happened when I was 18. It was a cold night, one I remember vividly to this day. My parents, who were always busy with work, left the house, looking deeply apologetic toward me and my younger sister, Emma. It was their wedding anniversary. It was my idea for them to have dinner at a nearby restaurant. Just the two of them. The snow was falling heavily that dark evening. If I had said, "It's snowing, so maybe you should stay home and relax instead," would Mom have paused, looked at me, and said, "You're right," before taking off her coat and coming back inside? Would that have changed their fate? On their way home after dinner, their car skidded on the icy road and slid into oncoming traffic, colliding with another vehicle. When Emma and I heard the news, we were consumed by disbelief. Relatives, friends, teachers, neighbors, everyone expressed their sympathy. But for me, I kept asking myself why I hadn't said, "The roads are dangerous because of the snow." I knew it was risky, but still let them go. The guilt from that night still lingers within me, even now, at 35 years old, a secret I've never shared with anyone. For Emma, who was only 6 at the time, life from that moment on must have been unbearably difficult. Determined not to let her feel alone, I resolved to take on the role of a parent. We had to sell the house we grew up in. Above the front door was a swallow's nest, where swallows returned every March. On the day we handed over the house, I cleaned every corner but couldn't bring myself to destroy that nest. I thought it would be sad if there was no place for them to return to. That's why I couldn't do it. I gave up on attending college and decided to work at a local factory. For an 18-year-old to raise a 6-year-old sister alone, it was reckless, to say the least. When a childless relative kindly offered to take Emma as their stepchild, I rejected the idea without consulting Emma. Thinking of Emma's happiness, I knew she would be better off with them. Life with me would be full of hardships. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to choose a life without my sister by my side. My relatives was incredibly kind. When I objected to making Emma their stepchild, they never pressured me. Instead, they became guarantors for the lease on the small apartment where Emma and I moved. Life on my factory worker's income was far from easy. Still, those relatives regularly sent us groceries and clothes. Although I always tried to decline their generosity, Emma would accept their gifts with pure innocence. I was still just an 18-year-old kid, but back then, I kept telling myself, I have to be Emma's mom. I have to act like an adult at 18. Time went by, and when I turned 25, I married my husband, Kevin. Emma, who was 13 at the time, hesitated to go to high school because she didn't want to burden me. But I desperately convinced her to continue her education, eventually supporting her all the way through university. Emma is like a daughter to you, right? So let's live nearby, Kevin said. He's not the type to express his feelings openly, but those words touched me deeply. Our newlywed life began by renting a room next door to the apartment Emma and I had been living in. We always ate dinner together, but Emma would return to her room afterward. Kevin never hesitated to help with Emma's education, and for that, I will always be deeply grateful. I can never thank Kevin enough. I'll never forget everything he's done for us. You don't need to thank me. I think of Emma like a little sister too, Kevin replied. Kevin wasn't good at expressing his emotions, but I could feel his efforts to communicate. If you paid attention to him, you'd notice his kindness. Both of us loved Kevin for the warmth he brought to our lives. Emma adored Monica, my daughter, and was a tremendous help with raising her. The four of us, me, Emma, Kevin, and Monica, shared happy days together. When Emma was about to graduate from college, a swallow's nest appeared above the apartment entrance. The droppings from the nest dirtied the entrance, but I laid down newspapers and decided to wait until the swallows finished raising their young. Every morning, as I cleaned the entrance, the soft chirping sounds brought a smile to my face. Those peaceful days came to an end last year when Emma graduated and got a job, prompting us all to move out of the apartment. Thank you for everything, Melissa, Kevin, Emma said as we parted. On the day Emma left, we hugged for a long time. The warmth of her hands reminded me of so many things our parents lost, the years we leaned on each other, and the life we built together. The warmth of her hands reminded me of so many things our parents lost, the years we leaned on each other, and the life we built together. Finally, it felt like we were standing at a place where we could look back on those memories with fondness rather than pain. Take care of yourself. And if anything happens, you can always come home. Every place we've left behind always seems to have a swallow's nest, doesn't it? It does. They say swallows build nests in places where kind people live. That must mean you, Melissa. I wasn't sure how to take those words. Am I kind? I still can't fully understand that about myself. I was simply doing my best, desperate, even. I didn't want to feel any more sadness. I didn't want to lose anyone else. Inside, I whispered to myself, how fragile and constrained I am. We moved into our long-desired new home, while Emma relocated to an apartment in the neighboring town. The swallow's nest, vacated after the chicks had fledged, was taken down and cleaned by Kevin. I hoped the swallows would build their next nest in another welcoming place. Now 35 years old, I work part-time as an office clerk, starting a new chapter in life with Kevin and our 8-year-old daughter, Monica. It's been a year since Emma moved out, and life without her feels strangely quieter. Kevin works as a sales representative for a small business. While he's earnest, his reserved nature has started to irritate me lately. In the past, I always had Emma to talk to, but now, Kevin is the only adult conversation partner I have. At dinner, I set the table with dishes prepared with care and love. Monica, delighted by her long-awaited chili con carne, starts eating happily, but I find myself restless. It's good, Kevin mutters awkwardly, his eyes never leaving his plate. He keeps glancing at his work smartphone, seemingly ready to respond to a call at any moment. His preoccupied demeanor frustrates me as I sit down and grip my spoon tightly. It seems like work has been keeping you really busy lately, I say, trying to express concern. Kevin looks up briefly, startled, then quickly averts his gaze, silently continuing to eat his dinner. By the way, I changed the flavor of the chili con carne a little this time. Did you notice? Yeah, maybe. Kevin, don't you think you've been spending less time at home lately? He freezes, spoon in hand, staring down at his plate in silence. The quiet gnaws at me, and irritation bubbles to the surface. What? Staying quiet means you don't care, doesn't it? My voice rises slightly, unintentionally. Monica looks up, startled, glancing back and forth between Kevin and me with a worried expression before bowing her head. Kevin sighs deeply before finally speaking. That's not it, but I've just been really busy with work. Busy, it's always that excuse. Do we even matter to you? I can feel my words growing more emotional, spiraling out of control, but I can't stop. Kevin stands up abruptly, clearly uncomfortable. Of course you matter. That's not what I meant. If we matter, then spend more time here. Talk with us. Play with Monica. You need to make time for your family. Tears well up in my eyes as my voice crescendos. I catch a glimpse of Monica's anxious expression, and guilt tugs at my heart. Kevin hesitates for a moment but then says nothing, heading instead to the upstairs restroom. The sound of the door closing and the lock clicking echoes faintly, leaving me sighing in exasperation. Here we go again. Since moving into this house, Kevin has developed a habit of locking himself in the upstairs restroom. The second-floor restroom is slightly larger, with a DIY bookshelf installed on one wall. Just the other day, I noticed him spending nearly an hour in there, seemingly engrossed in reading. Monica quietly continued eating her chili con carne, then murmured, "Do you think Dad's okay?" I forced a smile and replied, "Yeah, I think he's fine," but an emptiness lingered in my heart. Every time he isolates himself in that restroom, a sense of loneliness grows within me. I long to break this cycle. With that thought in mind, I began clearing the dining table in silence. The water flowing from the sink was cold, making the chill inside my heart feel even sharper. I want to understand him, but recently, I feel like I can't grasp what Kevin is thinking at all. Even the smallest things now escalate into arguments, and every time, he retreats to the restroom upstairs. It's become routine for him to stay locked in there for an hour, cutting into what little family time we have. Monica, sensitive to the tension between us, seemed to absorb the strain in her own way. Her grades started slipping, and I began receiving more frequent calls from her teachers. They mentioned her forgetfulness and lack of focus during class, concerns that added to my worries. The distance between us was growing, Our conversations had dwindled to almost nothing, and the warmth in our relationship was fading. One weekend, Emma came to visit. Since starting her job, she had been busy, and we hadn't been in touch much, so her sudden arrival was a pleasant surprise. I decided to drop by. "Have you been?" Seeing Emma's face, I couldn't help but smile. We reminisced over coffee, laughing at old memories. But before I knew it, I found myself venting about my current struggles with Kevin. Emma listened kindly, though her expression darkened slightly. "I know it's tough for you, Melissa, but maybe Kevin is dealing with something too." "I get that, but he always runs off to the restroom before I can even talk to him. Kevin's always been a bit clumsy with his feelings, hasn't he?" "But Melissa, more than anyone, you know how kind he is." Her words resonated deeply within me. Had I been trying to see things from Kevin's perspective? That evening, I waited alone for Kevin to come home. He had texted earlier, saying work was keeping him late, but the clock was nearing 10 p.m. I wanted something to change, but I didn't know how to make it happen. After putting Monica to bed, I sat alone in the living room, blankly staring at the TV. A scene from a drama showed children laughing joyfully, and I couldn't help but compare their happiness to my own current unhappiness. My heart grew heavier with every passing moment. This can't go on. I need to face Kevin properly. For the sake of our family, I had to take action. I started thinking about what I could do to improve communication. The first step, I decided, was to genuinely try to understand his feelings. I believed that by showing a willingness to connect with him, we could begin to rebuild our family bond. Kevin came home just before midnight. He seemed a bit surprised to find me waiting in the living room, but softly said, "I'm back." After slipping out of his suit and into more casual clothes, he returned. As I set out a late-night meal for him, his smartphone rang. In the quiet room, the faint voice of the caller could be heard, a young woman's voice. Without saying a word, I continued arranging the food on the table, straining to catch snippets of their conversation. Though I couldn't make out the details, an uneasy feeling crept into my chest. Lately, Kevin's overtime and weekend work had increased, and he often came home late. When he did return, he always looked exhausted, but a growing part of me couldn't shake the suspicion that he might be hiding something. "Yay, I see, thanks. I'm fine. See you tomorrow." Kevin's tone carried a tension that I couldn't ignore. As he hung up, I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Who was that?" "Work," he replied curtly, walking over to sit on the sofa in the corner of the living room. I studied his face, but his gaze seemed distant, focused on something far away. "I see." I decided not to press further. Still, as I reflected on his recent behavior, doubts gnawed at me. Was his business truly all due to work, or was there another reason? A few days later, I noticed changes in Monica's behavior. Always so cheerful, she now seemed withdrawn, retreating to her room after school and spending hours in silence. Worried, I tried asking her if something was wrong, but all she would say was, "I'm fine." That evening, during dinner, she suddenly burst into tears. Startled, I rushed to her side. "What's wrong? What happened?" I asked gently. Through her tears, Monica managed to say, "I'm sad because Dad and Mom aren't getting along." Her words pierced me, causing a pain that felt as if it were both emotional and physical. "That's not true. We're fine." I hurried to reassure her, but the words felt hollow, unable to carry any conviction. Monica's eyes reflected her deep-seated anxiety. I pulled her into a tight embrace and softly said, "Both Dad and I love you very much, Monica. So please, don't worry." I held her close, wishing that my words and actions could offer her the comfort and security she so desperately needed. A few days later, I was shopping at the cosmetics counter of a department store. Emma had taken Monica to the movies, and Kevin was at work on yet another weekend shift. I had some free time for once, and I wanted to refresh myself, even if just a little. Surrounded by rows of colorful lipsticks and perfumes, I absent-mindedly scanned the shelves. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something that froze me in place. Kevin. Through the narrow gap between shelves, I saw Kevin talking intimately with a young woman. His face bore a soft smile I hadn't seen in a long time. In that instant, the bustling noise of the department store seemed to fade, leaving only silence. The woman returned it with an enchanting expression, as though casting a spell on him. Unable to watch any longer, I turned and hurried out of the store, my heart pounding. Why am I running? Why am I avoiding this? Nearby, I noticed a sign, "Caution, swallow nests above." Looking up, I saw a small nest carefully built under the eaves. A worker with a broom was in the middle of dismantling it, likely long after the fledglings had flown away. A deep sadness welled up inside me. The swallows had worked so hard to build their home, only for someone to tear it down. My family feels the same. Even though the accident couldn't be helped, I can't just accept that it's just life. Something or someone always comes along to destroy what's most precious to me. But instead of grieving over what's been broken, I want to fight to ensure nothing else falls apart. Swallows might seem foolish. They work tirelessly to build their nests, only for them to be destroyed. Do they mourn for what they've lost in the same place someday? When I got home, Kevin arrived shortly afterward. My heart was racing as I carefully tried to maintain an air of normalcy. "I saw you at the department store today. Who was that woman?" Kevin seemed surprised, or at least I thought he might have been. I didn't have the courage to look at him directly, unsure what expression he wore or what his response would be. "Oh, that? She's just a coworker. Nothing important, just work." His casual, dismissive answer hit me like a cold slap, and doubt began to spread through my chest. A few days passed, and while doing laundry, I found something that shattered my composure. Receipt tucked into the pocket of Kevin's suit jacket. It carried a faint scent of perfume, and was for an expensive watch. Judging by the brand, it was the type of accessory worn by young women. I had been planning to suggest a rare family outing, with no weekend shift or interruptions for once. But now, it felt as though I had uncovered something I was never meant to see. I didn't want Monica to witness any more fights between us, but the feelings surging within me were impossible to suppress. In the living room, where Kevin was relaxing, I held out the receipt. "What kind of work connection made you buy this then?" "That's..." Kevin hesitated, his words faltering. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again, eventually lowering his head and letting his shoulders slump. "I'm sorry." "Sorry for what? Why can't you explain properly?" Kevin's expression grew darker as he fell silent. "You're always like this. Is it really so difficult to explain things? Why do you avoid putting things into words?" "It's just, I mean..." He fumbled for a response, then suddenly took out his planner from his bag. "I have an important business trip next week. Let me think about this when I get back," he said hurriedly, leaving with barely any explanation. The next day, he was gone. Once Kevin left for his trip, an overwhelming sadness took hold of me. Kevin had always been such a kind person. Ever since we first met, he didn't talk much and didn't have many friends, but his warmth and reliability were what drew me to him. When I was left alone to raise Emma after losing my parents, Kevin was the one who told me, I'll help you. Before Emma went to high school or college, he handed over all the savings he had quietly built up, simply saying, "Use it." He never got angry, even during small arguments. Instead, he would retreat to his refuge, the upstairs restroom. What had he been thinking about alone in that cramped space? Was he hiding there to message someone else on his smartphone? The thought sent waves of anguish through me, and tears started to fall uncontrollably. How did it come to this? I whispered, as though blaming myself. "Mom, come here right now, look at this." Monica's voice from upstairs startled me. There was a mix of excitement and urgency in her tone. Rushing up to the second floor, I found Monica standing frozen in front of the restroom. She was holding out a small black notebook, likely taken from the bookshelf in the restroom. "This is this Dad's?" she asked. A wave of unease rippled through me as I reached for the notebook with trembling hands. Monica's innocent curiosity clashed with the dread that something irreparable might be hidden in its pages. "Monica, just give me a moment." My voice faltered as I opened the notebook. Each page I turned tightened a coil of tension in my chest. What would I find in Kevin's private thoughts? How much pain or burden had he been carrying in silence? This uncertainty terrified me more than anything. "This notebook. Dad always keeps it, doesn't he? What's written in it?" Monica's voice broke through the storm of my thoughts, but my attention remained fixed on the pages. The first part contained mostly sales schedules and business-related notes, but as I flipped further, I noticed handwritten reflections filling the blank spaces in the latter half, less like a diary and more like a collection of fleeting thoughts and emotions. The notebook was filled with expressions of love and gratitude toward his family, but at the same time, it laid bare his struggles with work and his anxiety about the future. He wrote about his love for Monica, the pain of not being able to put it into words, and the struggle of wanting to say thank you for the smallest things, but being held back by feelings of embarrassment or fear of being seen as strange. The struggles Kevin had been carrying in silence, without ever sharing them with me, began to emerge, and I felt a tightening in my chest. With each page I turned, I could feel the loneliness in Kevin's heart, and my emotions began to overflow. "Mom, why are you so quiet? What was written in it?" Monica looked at me with worry in her eyes. I couldn't answer her question. I stood there, holding the notebook tightly in my hands. "Dad has been trying so hard all this time." I felt guilty for reading his private thoughts, but I continued flipping through the pages. The doubts I had slowly began to ease, but at the same time, I realized I had to face Kevin and his struggles. I started questioning what I could do to restore our family's bond. That night, I slept with Monica in the same bed for the first time in a while. We held hands and snuggled close, and as Monica drifted off to sleep, I thought about our family's future. Once I was sure Monica was sound asleep, I went to the living room and opened Kevin's notebook once more. Reading over the raw emotions he had poured out, I made the decision to face Kevin head-on. A sense of hope began to stir inside me. The stillness of the living room enveloped the space, and the only sound was the rustle of pages turning under the dim light. Then from between the pages, a receipt fell out, carrying the faint scent of perfume. It was the same receipt for the watch I had confronted Kevin about earlier. The page it was stuck in had written details about the item and the reason for the purchase. Emma's birthday present. Why? A rush of surprise filled me, but at the same time, my heart warmed. I realized that Kevin had thoughtfully chosen a gift for Emma, and the perfume smell had come from passing by the store when he was selecting the present. On the same page, there was a note. I asked a subordinate at work to help me choose the gift. My doubts began to dissolve little by little, and within the notebook, Kevin's true feelings were also revealed. I'm grateful to Emma for being a source of comfort for Melissa. She is more than just a sister, she's a very important person to Melissa and me as well. Those words struck deep within my heart. Yes, Emma was very important to me. After losing my parents, Emma was the only family I had left. Just as I cared deeply for Emma, Kevin also cared about her. And my emotions overwhelmed me. Thinking about how much effort Kevin had put into protecting our family, my chest tightened with sorrow. Why hadn't he been able to express his feelings? Now through the notebook, I was beginning to understand how much he had poured his heart into our family. Why hadn't he said it aloud? I realized that he must have struggled with putting his feelings into words. With his busy work life and limited time to focus on family, he likely didn't have the space to sort through his emotions. Perhaps Kevin didn't want to worry me, and that was why he had kept everything inside. Thinking about it that way, I was overwhelmed by the thought of how much loneliness he must have been carrying, and tears began to well up in my eyes. His overtime work was all for the sake of his promotion. I mumbled as I gazed at the notebook, tears blurring my vision. Kevin must have felt a sense of responsibility, believing he was working hard to protect the family, thinking that I would understand his efforts. But in reality, he had overlooked the doubts and fears I was feeling, leaving them unresolved. When I read the line in Kevin's writing, "It's painful to be doubted by Melissa, but I can't find the words to explain," my chest tightened once more. He, too, had been suffering to protect the family. Realizing this, I couldn't hold back my tears. What should I do? The words slipped out of my mouth in surprise, and I quickly covered my mouth. I had known from the start that he was an awkward person, that he was the kind of person who could be easily misunderstood and hard to understand. I couldn't help but feel guilty about my own suspicions. I hadn't tried to understand his feelings, and I had treated him terribly. Lately, I had been so preoccupied with Monica, who had been missing school more often, and perhaps that had been an excuse, but my heart had not found peace. I imagined Kevin struggling to bring joy to the family. When I thought about it, I began to understand how much effort he had put in. The reason he hadn't explained his actions was because he wanted to protect the peace at home. He had been pouring his love into the family, clumsy as it was, trying to make us happy. That night, I began writing a letter to Kevin, expressing my gratitude and my hopes for our family's future. We couldn't communicate well through conversation. That much was clear, so I wanted to express myself in a different way, with words, on paper. I wanted to tell him, openly and honestly, how I felt, along with my love for him. I felt strongly that I wanted to respond to the clumsy love he had shown me in the notebook. Weeks passed. I had wanted to apologize and reconcile with him many times, through text or by talking it out, but I wanted to do it face to face. When Kevin returned from his business trip and opened the door, I stood up from the living room where I had been waiting. I could feel the letter I was holding tightly in my hand, and bit my lip slightly. My heart raced as I felt the emotions I had been holding in for so long come rushing out. I'm home." His voice was still tentative, as always. As I stepped forward to face him, he turned his face away, looking somewhat troubled. Ignoring his strange behavior, I held out the letter to him. "I want you to read this." My voice may have been trembling, but at that moment, it didn't matter. Kevin, a little surprised, took the letter and read it with a puzzled look on his face. In the letter, I expressed the anxieties and doubts I had been carrying, as well as my apologies to Kevin. I deeply regretted how my thoughts and words had hurt him. After reading the letter, Kevin remained silent for a while, but gradually his expression softened. "Did you leave the notebook in the restroom?" "I'm sorry, I read it," I apologized honestly, and Kevin scratched his head a few times, falling silent. "Well, I don't really remember what I wrote, but I just wanted to organize my feelings and thoughts at the time." Yay. Honestly, I should have told Melissa properly, but I didn't really know how to. Yay, take your time. I quietly waited for him to speak. As he clumsily tried to explain, he slowly began to share his feelings. "I don't know how to say this, but I'm sorry for doing suspicious things. You're always like this. You don't talk much, so it's easy to misunderstand you. I couldn't explain anything. I just didn't want to make you worry, but in the end, I ended up hurting you." Listening to his words, I felt my heart slowly begin to soften. The time had come for us to honestly talk about our feelings. I wanted to understand Kevin's thoughtfulness and efforts. "Kevin, I'm really sorry for doubting you without considering your feelings. It's okay. I'm reflecting on it too. We should have communicated more. Let's talk properly from now on." There was a kindness in his voice. "Why don't we talk about the future with Monica too?" "That's a good idea. I think it's important for the family to discuss things together, instead of retreating to the restroom to think." He promised we would talk as a family. A few minutes later, Monica entered the living room. Seeing a change in our expressions, she looked at us with uncertainty. "Dad, Mom, what's going on?" We both gave her gentle smiles. "We've decided to talk about the future together," I said. A look of relief appeared on Monica's face, and she happily sat between us. Yay, I love talking together as a family. Kevin and I both smiled warmly from the heart at her words. "Well then, can you tell us about your dreams for the future, Monica?" "I want to be a florist when I grow up. I want to arrange lots of flowers and make everyone smile." "That's a wonderful dream, Monica. What do you think you should do to become a florist?" "I'll study how to grow flowers and help out. When you become a florist, I'll come buy flowers from you. I want to display the flowers you choose." Such simple conversations felt so comforting that day. As Emma's birthday approached, every time the three of us talked about the future, I could feel the bond between our family growing stronger. I vowed to continue making an effort to understand Kevin's feelings. A few days later, Emma's birthday arrived. The three of us prepared a homemade cake for Emma and happily got ready to celebrate. Monica enthusiastically decorated the room. Kevin helped with the cooking, and I wrote a message for Emma. On the day of the birthday, the living room was filled with a warm atmosphere, ready to welcome Emma. Kevin and Monica both greeted Emma together. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. Each family member, carrying their own feelings in their hearts, had made up their mind to take a new step forward. As we spent a joyful time together, the bond between us deepened. Kevin said, "I'll do the dishes," and Emma and I sat on the sofa, drinking coffee. Kevin washed the dishes clumsily, as if they might break. I don't really remember Dad and Mom's faces anymore. Monica suddenly spoke, and I stopped in my tracks. She was helping Kevin with the dishes, using her small body to put the clean dishes back on the shelf with all her might. I don't remember what we talked about or what we played. I was 6, but my memory is so bad. Emma. Melissa, do you remember? Dad and Mom. Of course, I remembered. Gentle Mom, dependable Dad. The memories of cooking together, going to the beach together. The family memories of holding little Emma's hand and walking together. I didn't want to think about it too much because it brought tears to my eyes. But in a way, I almost envied Emma for not remembering much. We made you suffer, didn't we? It was the time you needed to rely on Mom and Dad the most. That's not true. Emma fiddled with her bangs with her fingertips. It was a habit she had since she was young, when she was embarrassed. For me, Mom is you, Melissa, and Dad is Kevin. Emma looked at the watch she had just received as a gift from Kevin. The watch shimmered with light, its brilliance like that of a jewel. I'll give it to you, Kevin said. Even though today was Emma's birthday, he was still so quiet. I sat beside Emma on the living room sofa, bathed in the soft light coming through the window. I wondered if I had become Emma's mom. Had I been able to heal her heart, which must have been the most hurt? I'm going to the restroom. Can I use the one on the second floor? The second floor? Why go all the way there? Isn't it because Kevin always hides there, since it's so comfortable? Or is it a place just for Kevin, so I'm not allowed? While Kevin was washing the dishes, he slipped and dropped a plate. It didn't seem to break, but he was flustered and panicking. It's not just for me. And I don't use the second floor restroom for no reason anymore. It's the restroom full of memories, right, Emma? I'm not using that restroom anymore. Hang in there, Kevin. The conversation between quiet Kevin and teasing Emma was so amusing that Monica, who had been listening nearby, burst out laughing. It's fine to use the restroom. I just want you to use it normally. With his face slightly flushed, Kevin came up to me and handed me a ticket to the aquarium. A ticket to the aquarium. Melissa, I've been thinking a lot about something recently. Kevin quietly opened his mouth, and I stared at him. What about your parents? Kevin's voice trembled slightly. It had been so many years since my parents passed away. I squinted my eyes, feeling a mix of nostalgia and sadness, and said, "Come to think of it, I've been to that aquarium with Mom and Dad." Kevin nodded silently when he heard those words. We rented a car. Emma said she would watch over Monica, and I wanted to make up with you. Would you like to go with me? I'm sorry, but at that moment, Kevin's expression twisted. Since the accident involving my parents, I couldn't bring myself to get in a car. Holding little Emma's hand, the thought of possibly being in an accident like my parents haunted me, and I just couldn't get in a car. I'm sorry, but I can't go. I just can't. Kevin said, "I'm going to pick up the rental car now," and went out. Monica, who was going to the zoo with Emma while we went to the aquarium, was excited and happily shouted, "The zoo!" I was determined not to get in the car. Emma came back from the restroom and sat down next to me. "Go ahead. Are you scared of the car?" "It's not that, but if something happened to me and Kevin, then Monica, I'm here. If anything happens to Kevin or Melissa, Monica will have me." As I looked at Emma, tears welled up in my eyes. I see. The Emma sitting in front of me had grown so much, becoming a reliable woman. I no longer had to protect her, and in fact, she had become strong enough to even protect my precious Monica. Kevin, having rented the car, honked lightly in front of the house. Almost as if Emma had pushed me, I reluctantly sat in the passenger seat of the car. Kevin, who usually drives a company car, smoothly started the engine of the rental car and began driving. It had been such a long time since I sat in the passenger seat, and at first, I felt a bit scared, but I found myself staring at the passing scenery outside. Though sitting next to Kevin as he drove was comfortable, there was always an underlying sense of anxiety. What if I were in an accident like my parents? What would happen to Monica? What would happen to Emma? Those thoughts gripped my chest with unease. "Melissa, how about we take a little detour?" Kevin said cheerfully. His voice was full of anticipation, but the moment I heard his words, my heart grew heavy. But the driving, I replied carefully. What if we get into an accident? Kevin took my words seriously and looked at me with gentle eyes. Don't worry, Melissa. I'm here. No matter how much you worry, the chances of an accident are low, so you don't need to think about that. Though I felt comforted by his words, the fear inside me didn't disappear. This fear came from my desire to protect the ones I care about, Monica and Emma. But let's just enjoy the scenery today, okay? There's beautiful scenery waiting for us. The car took a slow winding road, and as the view opened up, blue skies and green land spread before us. I was captivated by the sight. The sunlight filtered through the trees, and vibrant colors rushed into my eyes. Surrounded by such a beautiful landscape, I felt my heart slowly begin to open up. Then Kevin spoke up. By the way, I heard Emma has a boyfriend now. Really? She has a boyfriend? I haven't heard about this. What's he like? I don't know much yet, but she was talking about him so happily, so he must be a great guy. Kevin's words were filled with love and hope for Emma. My heart naturally warmed, imagining how she was growing through this new love. Just thinking about it brought a smile to my face. I see, Emma has a boyfriend. Is it complicated? Yeah. It's a little lonely, but I felt something lift off my shoulders. The view through the car window looked even more beautiful than before. I could watch her grow as she experienced love. I wanted to continue walking forward with her, supporting each other, and cherishing the future. I want to cherish Emma even more from now on. And I want to become stronger myself. I didn't get a response from Kevin, but his silence seemed to affirm my words. The car continued to drive, seeking even more beautiful views. We advanced along the winding mountain road, and before us spread vast blue skies and green land. The car stopped at the top of a hill, where an awe-inspiring cliff awaited us. Beyond the cliff, something moved quickly through the air, catching my attention. A swallow, I said. A single swallow flew through the sky, soaring gracefully, occasionally diving or rising sharply. Its movement was like pure freedom itself. It's beautiful, I said. Yeah, really. It's so beautiful. As I watched that scene, I felt a new light shining within me. I had simply been turning my eyes away. But the world is this beautiful. With my vision blurred by tears, I continued to watch the swallow's flight.